I promised you raised platform shelter number 2. And just a couple of quick points before I get started. Steve Kaposi at the Adventuring Camping School in Northeast Thailand. And I've already talked about raised platform shelter number 1, which is pretty much it. This is just a few modifications and we'll get going. Of course you want the ridgepole between 2 trees or branches. Just find yourself 2 trees, a ridgepole or ridge line for a tarp can go between 2 trees. I've just got these up on stakes, I've got no trees here, so that's an option. But otherwise 2 trees are the best way to go. Now if you have a look down here, I talked about there are 2 ways to make a platform. 6-foot poles all the way along, that's what I've got up here. I've got 2 6-foot poles here, they've got the 1-inch diameter poles running acrossways to make the bed. The reason I've got the 1-inch poles here is because it gives you a bit more height above the ground. That platform is about 6 inches above the ground, and I would rather be sleeping up there than on the dirt, even with a plastic sheet. So that gives you a secondary platform for storage of gear, firewood and so forth, which is going to be under your tarp, or a second person can lay down there and sleep. Now look at these support beams I put here. A couple of support beams. You can put 6-foot poles along here. I don't even have more 6-foot poles, I've run out of material here. But imagine if you had 6-foot poles along here, you've got yourself another working platform. So as you can see, I've now got a raised platform for storage of gear, firewood, or a second person. 2 people can now sleep under a 6x8 tarp. Now the reason you want these raised platforms, I've already talked about raised platforms in previous videos. It's not so much for floods and things, it's just when it rains, you're going to have water coming in under your shelter. I don't care how carefully you select your shelter site, in prolonged rain, you're going to have water coming in. It gets you off the ground, you can have water coming in now, you can even make a fire up here. I'm just going to go through the main features very quickly. Your platform wants to be about 2.5 feet off the ground. That means a second person can be down here, you can store how much gear can you store and firewood can you store up there. And this platform here becomes about 6 inches off the ground. The main components are 4 stakes in the ground, 2-inch in diameter, very sharp point, and a notch, a V-notch to support these cross beams, which are just 1-inch poles to support the 6-foot poles. 3 foot long, and you pound it down to about 2.5 feet, thereabouts, roughly. In very hard ground, it can be hard to pound stakes in. That's why the stakes have to be very sharp. So 2 1-inch diameter cross beams to support 6-foot poles. The bed itself needs to be about 2 feet wide, but a 2-foot bed, that's 24 inches, 12 2-inch poles, or about 7, 8 3-inch poles, thereabouts. 2-inch poles are more comfortable. So 2 feet wide, these supports are 2.5 feet wide to support your 6-foot poles for a 2-foot wide bed. And again, the secondary platform, 2 support beams, 2 3-inch in diameter, 3 inches better to get a bit higher off the ground, 2.5 feet long. 2 6-foot poles running lengthways, 2 to 3 inch in diameter, and then you've got about 70, 72 1-inch poles to run acrossways to make your bed. So 6 foot equals about 72 inches, and that's quite a few poles to cut. Depends whether it's easier to cut 6-foot poles or 1-inch poles. That's why there are 2 ways to make the bed. The 1-inch poles for the bed, or just 6-foot poles, 2 to 3 inch in diameter. So it's really your choice. So you can see a couple of more support beams, 6-foot poles, you've got yourself a secondary platform coming out here. So that's essentially raised platform shelter number 2, and these are just 5-foot poles hammered down to about 4 foot high. The ridge pole should be about 4 feet high or thereabouts. That's a bit high, that's just under 4 feet, that's above 4 feet, that should be lower. I can trim that off quite easily, but you want at least 1.5 feet above your head. It can be lower above your feet, but 1.5 feet I find is comfortable to have a tarp over my head. 6x8 tarp over the shelter. I thought I can have a bit of an awning coming over a platform coming out there, but it's too small. Don't forget a 6x8 tarp is actually about 5.5 by 7.5. You get ripped off. So I actually had to put the 8 foot, which is about 7.5 feet, lengthways to cover my body, because a 6 foot is only about 5.5 feet. It won't cover my bodies. And there's just enough room to really make a small V shape to have a shelter. Any larger tarp, then you could string out as an awning configuration. Better still over a secondary platform coming out there. If you have an awning coming out, you've got a work area and so forth. But that's the bare minimum to have your bed, storage space for firewood underneath, and in a pinch a second person can sleep under there as well. Don't forget these ridgepole support poles are at least 6 foot apart. Your ridgepole's at least 7-8 feet long. And also very critical is to just put some stakes in the ends to support these 6 foot poles. You can get up and they can slide off the end, so put stakes in. And you just got to roll in. Put a leg up, nice and easy. You can turn over. Just like that. In a pinch, in an emergency, that's fine. You're up high, a second person can sleep underneath, or you store your gear and firewood down there. Bit of a pillow. And we get off, nice and easy, and just roll out like so. One leg down, support yourself, and out you come, just like that. A bit ungainly, but it can be done, just nice and carefully. It's not a bed for your home, so you don't want to jump up. And I might as well climb in the bottom just to show you. Just like that. I'd rather be sleeping 6 inches off the ground on a platform than on the dirt, even with a plastic sheet. And the most critical, not going to stop. You might stop some creepy crawlies, but most importantly, you're going to stop the water. When it rains, water's going to come in, and you're going to be nice and up off the ground, nice and dry. You can now sleep 2 people under one tarp, store your gear or firewood, whatever. So there it is. I hope that makes sense. Any questions I can clarify? I hope it was clear, and I'll see you next time.